Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Marc Kate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 43. This is our Halloween episode. Not the movie, not the remake, but the holiday.
Yeah.
Just sort of the time of year.
Yeah, I'm feeling it this year a lot in a way I haven't in years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You're not dressed for it.
No, well, I wear black a lot, so.
Oh my God, me too. Our next episode is back to the culture at large. We're going to be covering Catherine Bigelow's 1987 movie, Near Dark. This was your choice, right?
Yeah, this movie rules. I mean, it's got Bill Paxton in it. It's awesome. The dude that plays Bishop from Alien, I can never remember his name, that actor.
I just watched Alien and Aliens recently, and there's so much overlap with these movies. It's really pretty awesome.
And then Catherine Bigelow is a phenomenal filmmaker. I mean, I guess she won the Academy Award for Hurt Locker, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say she deserved an Academy, but she got one. But so many good movies.
Near Dark's way better than Hurt Locker, excuse me.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I totally agree. But, she made America really fall in love with Keanu Reeves, Point Break.
True.
And her movie, I think, Near Dark, there's a lot that's fun in it. It's one of the first really big punk rock vampire movies that was out there. And I think you can feel its influence on a lot of the later vampire culture stuff. Like, it's all over that role-playing game, Vampire the Masquerade, and a bunch of other stuff. You can feel it in Underworld a little bit,
Yeah, cool. Yeah. You can email us at whatthe@scarythoughts.org about Near Dark, about anything you'd like us to cover. Just reach out. It's nice to hear from you guys. Do you have anything to plug?
No, I have nothing going on.
Me neither. Nothing happening.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell our people to rate and or review?
Yeah, so this is going to be the last time I request anybody to rate and review our podcast. We're getting pretty close to 100 reviews. We're at 84. They're all but 2 of them are 5-star reviews. So I think we've made a pretty good run at it. And, all my favorite podcasts are not asking for shit most of the time. So I think we might be sunsetting that request. If you're listening to old episodes and you're feeling it and you haven't reviewed, go ahead, go for it. But, it seems to have done nothing for us personally. It is not...
Little ego boost.
A little ego boost. More than anything, it's just nice hearing people's thoughts. And I would much rather somebody write an email to us and tell us we were right on something or some movie that we should see or, any number of things that would be more interesting than a review on iTunes.
Yes. One thing I do recommend you do is go join our newsletter. If you go to scarythoughts.org, there's a little form. Give us your email address. We'll treat it with dignity and respect and keep in touch about each episode.
Yes, we are GDPR compliant.
Are we?
If you know what that means, I feel bad for you.
And we don't have to talk about spoilers because we're not covering anything that could be... Actually, we are.
We are covering one thing.
We will. Let's get to that later.
This will be the first time that we do not provide spoilers for something that we cover because it's something that I like so much. I don't want anyone who might hear this to not have the full experience.
But first things first, this episode is going to start off with a really bad idea. And you might want to fast forward 10 minutes starting soon.
Yeah, I think we should figure out how long it takes, and then you go back in and cut in how long it is. Like, say, go to timestamp, blah, blah, blah.
No, they have to figure it out.
Okay.
Okay, once the screaming starts, that's probably when you can start listening again. Do you want to tell them what is in store for them and more significantly us?
Okay, so Marc has... heard, I believe, that I have a really insanely high tolerance for spicy foods, which is my birthright as a person from Louisiana. And he mentioned that he had tried this chocolate bar that was totally insane, blow your face off, super hot, like a psychedelic experience.
Yeah, it's 9 million Scoville. My friend Andy Connors. Oh, Andy, who was on our black metal episode.
Yeah.
He shared a piece with me, and it was like psychedelics. Like, it was so hot, I could not have a linear thought. I could not contain myself. I swore so much. It was crazy weird.
Yeah. And so I thought, man, that would be great for the show. So I ordered them off the internet. You can get them at VAT19. It's a world's hottest chocolate bar. They have a couple other things like Satan's Toe Lollipop or whatever. This stuff is just made for YouTube, basically, like doing terrible things.
Yeah.
And what really appealed to me about it was, one, it's candy. It's around Halloween. There's the whole like razor blades and chocolate bars, and so I had this like, I thought it would be something fun about having this really uncomfortable, terrible, crazy thing. And then I also like, I'm never afraid of anything. Like, I mean, like obviously if somebody pulls a gun or whatever, but like pop culture stuff, eating challenges, like I could eat a cockroach, like any of this weird shit, I'm just not scared of it. But for some reason, this one kind of like had me sweating a little bit. I was like, oh, this is not anxiety inducing, but there's a little thrill over it. And I was like, man, that sounds like fun and terrible. And since we have this audience, meager as it is, I thought it might be fun to do this in front of some people.
Yeah. I think it's sort of very made for YouTube. This will be interesting for people to just listen to probably a lot of sweating and silence.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. I'm also making another run at not smoking pot. So I'm curious to see if this has like kind of a mind altering effect on our conversation too. Cause I think I've been nearly blackout stoned on about half of these episodes.
That explains a lot to me and many of our listeners.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see if people can guess which episodes.
I would love to know just if there was a way to quantify how much people like each kind of your cannabinoid enhanced performance in these episodes, which ones people like the most without knowing or even thinking about it one way or the other.
Yeah.
Like what your performance is actually like.
I mean, I find in general, like my performance on it is not good. And I wouldn't say not good, but it's not as good as sober. Like for instance, like my favorite episode that we've done is the Pawnee Pool episode.
Yeah.
Totally sober.
Yeah.
But I
find when you're high, you're funnier, but it's hard to get an episode doing the thing that an episode maybe should. Like we'll have these plans, we'll talk about what we want to talk about, and if you're high, none of them happen, but you're really funny.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The other thing too is usually I'm like going like I can't read stoned. Right.
No.
So when I'm going on like
same.
a full on long term, like 2 or 3 month bender, I'm not reading as much as I would like to.
Yeah.
And I find that probably more than anything dims the show a little bit.
Right.
So I'm hoping that this newfound sobriety and rage will enhance this episode for people. Although this chocolate bar might also ruin it. So
it's going to be really awful.
All right. So we get into it?
All right. So this chocolate's effects, like, when you eat spicy food, it generally takes about 10 minutes before it wears off. So if you're like, I downloaded this podcast to listen to philosophy and culture discussions. Fuck this.
Yeah, go back, find that Pawnee Pool episode.
Yeah, go listen to that.
Yeah, and then come back to this.
Sounds good. All right.
So, are we doing it?
Dish it out.
Let's do it. I'll eat this one. I'll give you that one.
Okay. Ready?
Yes.
This is going to be awful. Ready? 2, 3.
Great.
It's in my mouth. I just swallowed it.
It's bad.
It's coming on. The flavor hurts.
Mm-hmm.
My throat is swelling up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably turning as red as you are right now.
Am I red?
You're turning red.
Yeah, it's the chocolate's actually pretty good.
It is. It's weird.
Yeah.
You are a lot calmer than I feel.
It's hot, but it's not nearly as devastating as I thought it was going to be.
I think I was a little prepared because I've taken it before.
Mm-hmm. Should I eat the whole bar?
Did you chew it?
Yeah, I chewed it up. You look like you're having a prolonged orgasm.
I'm not. It's the opposite. I feel awful. This is really bad.
I'm going to say for the record, this bar isn't shit.
Have one more. One more piece. Double up. I'm not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like it's not hot, and then my eyes are tearing up because that always happens when something's super spicy, but
I don't like this.
Oh, man, your reaction is amazing. Guzzling the beer. I have yet to take a sip of water. Wow. Man.
Sorry,
I feel like
everybody.
we're having two totally different
We
experiences.
really are. What the hell's happening with
Wow,
you?
this is amazing. Like I said, I have like a mutant ability to withstand heat. I mean, it's kind of not really fair.
Can you entertain people while I freak
I'll
out?
entertain people. Yeah, I keep not saying anything because I feel like it's about to just come on all of a sudden, but it just hasn't happened so far. You got the, you're wiping your tongue off now? That's, that feels like cheating to me. Is it getting worse? Or is it crusted?
I think it almost has. How'd you do that?
I don't know.
It's still in your hand.
No, I ate 2 of them.
Fuck. It's so bad.
I mean, you can tell because my face is red, right? Like, it's not like I cheated.
Yeah, but I'm like sweating and the snot is coming out of my face.
Yeah. See, I always felt like there was probably some. The one thing is, okay, so my tongue and my mouth doesn't like really impair. Like, I don't get like totally blown out, but it will upset my stomach in the way that it would upset a normal person.
Last time I did it, it actually didn't upset my stomach for some reason.
Like, my stomach is not stoked right now, but I mean, I don't know. This isn't as bad as the hottest potato chip. I had a bite of that. That thing was really terrible.
Not as bad flavor-wise, you mean? Or that felt hotter somehow?
That felt hotter.
Did you chew it and keep it in your mouth for a moment?
I chewed it up. I have chocolate all over my tongue.
I don't know what's happening. Okay, it's abating.
See, I feel like I could go on hot ones and just...
You probably could.
I could just put my dick all over those chicken wings, and no one would be able to compete. It's a lot of dead air for the radio.
Yeah, you got to fill this time for me.
Yeah. I feel like I could definitely do the one every 12.
The challenge?
So the full challenge with this chocolate bar is it comes in 12 pieces, and you're supposed to take one every minute for 12 minutes. I think I could totally do that.
Yeah, it seems like you could.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it might upset my stomach, though. My stomach, I have the Jewish stomach, which is easily upset. So, yeah. Man, I was hoping to have a little more of a reaction here. Your reaction is incredible, though.
Yeah, sorry for everybody. Not like I wish you could see me now, but if this was a visual medium, you would all probably be slightly entertained. All you're just hearing from me is nothing.
Yeah.
But I'm just like contorting and sweating and upset.
This reminds me of you in jiu-jitsu.
This is what it's like to fight Marc in jiu-jitsu. I look like I'm on the verge of crying the whole time.
I will say though, I don't want to get us down the jiu-jitsu talk road because none of our
there's
fans
there's no real center to this episode, so go for it.
Well, what I would say is you were always I guess I'm doing okay. Or you got pretty good, man. In a year, you got promoted. You're doing well. You've tried with me successfully several times.
Okay, I'm almost back to normal.
Okay, you're back to normal?
Getting there.
Okay. I don't think this took us 10 minutes to recover.
No.
I mean, so.
Oh, God, that was really awful.
This is roughly half as bad as I thought it was going to be.
My back hurts. Not the part of my back that always hurts, but I have so much tension in my body right now.
Yeah, I feel like somebody, it's like dipping a Kit Kat bar in Tiger Balm. That's. Are you disappointed in my lack of reaction?
Confused,
yeah. Crystal thinks I have some sort of alien genetics.
Maybe.
Yeah. I've been looking for a hot pepper eating contest because I think I could probably do pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty good with hot food.
Yeah,
and this is, oh God.
Yeah,
I think I might throw up.
Yeah, if you want to throw up, that's okay. I'm not going to judge you.
much.
But can we film it? Do you remember this band, the Royal Trucks?
Yeah, I saw them live.
Oh, great band.
I might have shared a bill with them. I forget, but I've definitely seen them.
Yeah, phenomenal band. Kind of no one remembers them, but I remember one of their album covers because they were super into heroin was a toilet with a bunch of vomit in it.
Yeah.
I remember at the time thinking that was like the coolest thing ever.
It's not.
It's
nor
definitely not.
is heroin, kids.
No, heroin is not the coolest thing ever either. Man, I think this is as boring as this is to our viewers. This may be my favorite episode so far.
Hi. All right. Weren't we going to talk about things?
Yeah, we're going to talk about stuff. So, as a former gothy type myself, and you're still relatively gothy, Halloween, I think, was the best time of year for a lot of reasons. One, it was when, if you're old enough, it was the only time that you could get black nail polish, black lipstick, and stuff for your apartment if you were super gothy. And so, I think nowadays you can go to Disney World and get like Nightmare Before Christmas shit, and you can get a child's onesie with Skeleton Jack or Jack Skellington or whatever his name is on it and stuff. Do you think that has made Halloween less cool? Now that you can have spooky shit all year round?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It's always that question about like authenticity and things in their origins. I think for me, how do I put this? I feel like we're almost different generations, but my generation into your generation were maybe sort of like the last eras of American teenage subcultures, really. Like that your identity is genuinely wrapped up in this sort of like lifestyle that's connected to music and the way you dress, and that obviously still happens, but it's not like it used to be. It's shifted. The meaning of that has changed tremendously, and I think part of growing up as like a punk or a metalhead or a goth is that you have this relationship to who's authentic, who's real, who are the posers, and then all of those subcultures you sort of watch mainstream media notice it, and then you find mainstream media taking it over, and then it's no longer yours. And then if you're like us who had that relationship to culture pre-internet, now because of the internet, there's no time lag. It just, the second something exists, there's already memes about it, and it's already parodied, and everybody has access to the goods.
Yeah, in the olden days, there's a little bit more of like a subcultural archipelago that happened. Like you were a goth or you were a punk, and for me, it was like you just didn't have enough money to switch between things. You know what I mean? Yeah. And now, like I see one of the fun things about riding public transportation, like one of the only fun things about it is that you see what young people are doing when you're an older person, and it's interesting to see. One trend I've noticed lately is a lot of like young black girls are sort of dressed like skinhead chicks right now. Like I've seen a lot of flight jackets and Doc Martens happening, which is, it's kind of like an interesting thing. Cause like to me, that has one meaning, and I don't even know what the meaning has to that kid. Like a young girl from Oakland, is she also listening to the specials too? Or is it just a fashion thing that she's picked up and taken on for herself? Right. And then, a couple weeks ago I saw these really young Latin dudes, and they were, how like there's these Latin Morrissey fans, that's like a whole thing. They were like that, but like to the max. And I used to see, you'd only see that level of total insanity with Japanese subculture fans in the old days. You'd meet like a Japanese rockabilly dude who looked like he was ready to be a villain in a 50s movie. Yeah. And they would do it super, super perfect. And I feel like that's a difference between like youth attachment to these subcultures now. It's like they nail it. Like if you go look online, like if you look through like the people who follow us or people we follow on Instagram for the Scary Thoughts page, there's a lot of like people who were makeup people. For whatever reason, there's a lot of people who do makeup and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And each one of those girls fucking nails it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And they look like, the best looking models from Propaganda magazine in the mid 90s.
Right.
And I was thinking about how, especially during Halloween when I was growing up, I remember all these girls being like ethereally beautiful. But now with Facebook, I can go look at it. I'm like, and some girl that I used to know has a picture of herself up. I'm like, oh, you were wearing a Curateur shirt that was like the size of a house over some fishnets, and you had a black lunchbox, and that was pretty much it, and like my memory of it was so much more dialed in, and I looked like a goddamn moron the whole time. I looked like a cross between a Harry Potter and a school shooter, that's it's pretty much my look.
Yeah, I mean, I think that with all of this, there's bad and good, right? Like, sticking just with goth and Halloween-y stuff, there's far more access to those clothes. There are far more people making those clothes. So it becomes more specialized, but becomes less special.
You're right.
But one thing that definitely comes with the territory is a lot of these makeup artists who delve in darker terrain on, say, Instagram, their tools have evolved a lot. Like, makeup has come a long way in the last 2 to 3 decades. So they have access to stuff that no one had access to in the 80s and 90s, which is kind of rad too. You can dial in these looks far better. I mean, it's sort of like special effects in movies, right? Even makeup effects. We have better tools now. It's just, do you use them or not?
Yeah, you look at like if you look at like Kat Von D's makeup, line. I mean, that shit is just made for the gothest people of all time, and people do it like all these really interesting shading techniques and stuff like that. I remember like Halloween black lipstick was like putting wax on your face. There's like pretty much nothing you could do, and it would like come off in like 2 seconds. And it's interesting how no one looked good back then, really, except for the occasional person. Like you get like a Cinnamon Hadley or somebody like that. She was the girl that was the face of death.
Yes.
Yeah, she inspired death, and she was really interesting. I actually, since I recently reread the whole Sandman series cover to cover, and you had mentioned her, and I didn't know that. Like I had no idea.
Yeah,
and she had a really sad life. She died of cancer and all this stuff. But there's like a lot of this. Like you can look for the hashtag of her name on Instagram and see people like doing her look as it was. Like, so they're doing like this period correct mid 90s Cinnamon Hadley look. It's just really interesting to see that come in and be remixed in certain ways. And I remember when I was young, older goths would like shit on us all the time. They would just fucking hate us for whatever reason, because they're old and fat and not with it anymore or whatever. But I look at younger people doing it, and I'm stoked for it. I think it's cool, doing it more extreme and just better.
Yeah. So,
have you recovered yet?
No, I feel so bad. I gotta be honest.
I think we may have ruined this podcast episode with this stupid stunt.
I'll just brave my way through this. Speaking of people who, were
Is it still hot?
It's not still hot, but I'm right on the verge of just throwing up on you.
You know what?
Like, I feel
you should
really
not do that
nauseous
because hot stuff is going to come out in the vomit, and that's going to be terrible
for you.
For you, like you thought it was bad going down. How do you think it's going to be coming up with like chutney or whatever the hell you ate earlier?
God damn it! Yeah. Well, I'm also burping a lot, and that's sort of resurfacing some of the oils in my throat. Jesus. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
So what?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, let's fucking move on. Oh God. I've taken 2 showers today, and I'm gonna go take a third this second.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, let's get back into Halloween.
Yes.
So Halloween in New Orleans was a big deal. It is probably, if you've never been to New Orleans, I think that Halloween is the best time of year to go because the people who are into dressing up still go out and do it. It's not as big as Mardi Gras is, but it's people who really count are dressed up, and it's really fun. And there used to be a haunted house there that was run by Pantera, and it was called the House of Shock. And it was great. And I would say it is still the best haunted house I've ever been to in my life. The close runner-up, though, we just went to a couple nights ago. We went
Yes.
to Peaches Christ's Terror Vault.
Yeah.
And I'll start off like why I liked the House of Shock a little bit more.
Yeah.
Is it's just more heavy metal, you know? So
Right.
it was like there would be like, you know, cover bands playing or whatever. It was explicitly satanic. That was pretty fun. There was a lot of like anti-Catholic stuff, but like in a goofy way, you know what I mean? Like all those dudes grew up Catholic or whatever. They're not exactly black metal dudes burning down churches, you know what I mean? They're not as against it because the culture of Louisiana, I think in some ways is just so fun and interesting that like you're not going to throw it out, you know?
Right.
And it also doesn't represent the state in the way the church does in Norway or whatever. Anyway, it was a bit louder, you know, and they had like the chainsaw without the chain on it, and people would scream, and they could grab you, which was unheard of back then. Like, and there's an opt-in feature we'll talk about in a minute at the Terror Vault, but it just felt like no holds bars like back then. And one of my favorite memories is when I was a little kid, I went with my uncle. I don't remember why, but apparently like I like fell down or passed out or something like that, and which is really weird for me because I don't get scared by stuff. But I think the House of Shock was legitimately scary to me when I was a little kid, and I don't know why I didn't like connect that it was fake in the way that a horror movie was. You know, I didn't think of it as like, oh, this is an interactive horror movie. I just thought of it as this terrifying experience where you didn't know what the fuck might happen. And part of the fun of it was you would hear stuff in rumor in class like, oh, they have this inmates from the asylum are actually working there. Like you would hear all this crazy shit that was completely unsubstantiated and you couldn't check it because there was no internet.
Great.
And I think, you know, even with this chocolate thing right now, imagine if you couldn't look up that chocolate and somebody just said, dude, this will blow your fucking face off and you'll be shitting blood later. I think that you would have more anxiety about it. But now I look it up online. Like as soon as I looked up the dude that was freaking out on the video, I was like, this guy's obviously a pussy. You know, like you're having a bad reaction. This dude on the video was having a fire alarm meltdown, which I'm sure is just to sell it or whatever.
Sure.
But there's something about that pre-internet time, being young, being in Louisiana, being in New Orleans. And so that was to me the greatest horror haunted house of all time. But a very close runner-up is Terror Vault by Peaches Christ, which is currently going on in San Francisco. And I'm sure it'll happen next year. I'm sure it'll be even bigger and better next year. But it is an absolute blast. It's one of the most fun things I've done in a long time.
Yeah, it's in the Mint, the old Mint in downtown San Francisco, which used to be literally the Mint. It held like, what was it, like a third of the wealth
gold.
of USA. And there's a basement to it that's really big and really creepy. I mean, it looks like an old, 100-year-old epic basement.
Yeah, it looks like something where like the Count of Monte Cristo would escape from.
Totally.
Yeah, and if anything, like it's worth the ticket price just to go see that shit down there that you probably never get to see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really fun. And a lot of super talented people are like the Goons and Goblins, and Peaches Christ does a performance basically like 30 times a night every night.
Oh my god. And it is like I wasn't expecting it. Like I didn't think she would be there. Like I didn't expect that to be part. I was like, oh, she's probably performing somewhere else. This is her idea. She's putting it on, whatever. But that scene, there's a scene where she's in it, and it is phenomenal.
It's like a satanic revival.
Yeah, and it was really great to go with you and Monique because you guys know so many people in it. I felt like
it was kind of funny. Like someone would come around the corner and go like "rah," and it would be like a friend of mine and be like, "Aha, yeah."
Yeah, and Monique's like, "Yes, witch." Like it's just super funny. And one of the things I thought was very clever about it is how they blended the actual creepy history of the Mint in with the storyline of the thing. Like,
it does have a weird history.
Yeah, there's some really dark shit that happened there. And if there is real haunting in the world, I think it has something to do with the weight of a story on a place and the way that people tell the story. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that is what probably like haunting is really about.
Well, I feel like that is New Orleans, right?
The whole thing. I mean, like there's a, we're in the suburbs and there's a tree where somebody like apparently hung a pirate from, and you take acid and go look at it at night and be like, you were supposed to be able to see the outline of the pirate on it or whatever. And I feel like, not being a young person now, I can't know, but I never hear about any of that stuff, and it seems a shame that this word of mouth folklore doesn't it happen in the way it used to, especially in kind of like scary ways, you know?
But it's funny that, I mean, we covered this on our Conjuring episode particularly, but yet at the same time, there's never been a better time for misinformation and people believing nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, you have full access to fact, but where is it, and are you going to believe it once you get there?
Yeah, I think though, like there's a little bit of a difference in that, like all these false narratives that are created in the news right now are designed to push people into categories, you know, to where you're like, well, I'm obviously alt-right, you know, or like, hey, I'm totally on the left. Like, I
love those voices.
Yeah, like, and the reason why I do those voices is because they're so stereotypical.
Yes.
And you might like bristle at them if you identify with either of those categories. But if you're on the other side, you absolutely recognize the voice is probably like your natural enemy or whatever, you know?
Totally.
And like those old stories, those old horror stories were just designed to keep people from being killed. Like, don't go in that field.
Yeah.
You know, there's a hole in it and we don't want you to fall in it. So now it is haunted.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of those old stories were designed as like warnings, you know, like you couldn't explain something like, why don't you want me to go over there? Well, there's a demon and it's going to eat your dick. Okay, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, that's why children shouldn't go into the forest alone.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of the witch, or actually just animals and getting lost, and
yeah,
it wants to kill you just as a matter of course.
You know, and a lot of like even like in the film The Witch, you know, it does a really good job of like the forest on the edge. Yeah. I think like there's not really much of a forest on the edge anymore, right? Like in our culture, like where is the edge of wilderness? You know, you get something like Grizzly Man, but that just seems like a bad idea. Like you didn't get enough shit from REI or Cabela's, and therefore you got fucked up. But it's not like a giant unknown creature of death is out there and you believe in it anymore or something like that. And like that's why I'm almost happy that I'm of like a sort of like a credulous, sort of dumb generation where we didn't have all the smart stuff, you know, access to all this information. Is it allowed you, and it allowed in the way that not showing a monster in a horror movie allows your imagination to fill in the blanks a little bit. Now it's like you're just a Reddit thread away from knowing everything. You know, like like you can ruin a movie for yourself by going to the Wikipedia page and being like, oh shit, that person dies in the end. Oh, there goes all the suspense.
Right.
And I don't know. Like I definitely think that is sad that is missing now.
I agree.
But like you said, it is rearing its head in these weird like false narratives, and they're creating like actually terrifying thing. Like today, I think like 11 people were shot in a synagogue or something like that. And that is the result of storytelling. Like this dude who did it believes in the Zog government, you know, the Zionist occupied government, or, you know, hilariously, he's like, you know, Jews are committing a genocide. You're like, dude, there's like no Jews. Like there's hardly any in the world as far as, you know, like if you look at the population or whatever. And to have that belief and then go and enact it is pretty fucking nuts, man. But, you know, in the old days, people burned witches. So is this similar to that? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, not to paint this sort of thing with a coat of woo, but it's almost as if humanity needs a very high level of nonsense to explain things away, and having all this access to facts and science and all this evolution of rationality, just it's like it's untenable. It can't be assimilated.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I've been going on this like brain science kick lately, like reading all these different books. I'm reading Robert Sapolsky's excellent book, Behave. You could basically skip every other neuroscience book that you see at the airport and just grab this one. It's much heavier read, but you'll be better for it if you read it. But you realize like how really faulty the wiring of the brain is, you know, and the idea that, oh, you could just logic your way out of it. That's not really true. Like people just don't believe logically sound arguments. And it seems to be, from reading all these books, especially the ones that are sort of more marketing oriented, is like people do like, or maybe even require narrative framework to understand things. And you're having all these different interactions with narratives where it's like your own personal narrative, where you're like the hero of your own little story. And then you're now in this position where you're in this mass media age, which is even more extreme, because like in the old days, like mass media was like, okay, well, Walter Cronkite Walter Cronkite comes on and like maybe 100 million people find out what he said. Now, one person can fire up a YouTube channel and the whole world could potentially see it. So you have this like chaos of narratives going around, and it's like they're fighting out with each other. And then now people can really interrogate old narratives like, oh, the Catholic Church or Mormonism or Islam, and look at them and be like, hey, look, well, this is the story and these parts of the story suck. And now what? Like, do you take them apart and end up in some sort of weird little new age space? Or do you pull like a Zizek with communism and just double down and go back to it? I don't really know like what the future of that would look like.
Yeah. So something you had brought up about Halloween off mic was the idea of Halloween as performance.
Mm-hmm.
Was that sort of what you already were talking about earlier, or is that a sort of further thought?
I was thinking about it is like in any city pretty much on Halloween night, you can go out and you can see people who never exhibit any sort of creative urge in the rest of their life. Maybe that's unfair, but like you would not recognize it. You know what I mean? Like you would be like, well, this person just goes to work, takes care of the kids, goes home. That's fine, but they're not creative.
Yeah.
But on Halloween, it's like this massive burst of creativity. And it seems to be mostly everybody wants to be creatively sexy in some way. Like it's a sexy witch, or my favorite Halloween costume from this year that got pulled from shelves, the sexy handmaiden's tale costume.
God.
It was the best costume. To me, it just showed that like Halloween gives zero fucks, you know? And today I read a story about this guy who dressed up as a 5-year-old kid as Hitler. And they walked around like they're like historical.
Dressed his 5-year-old
his
kid?
5-year-old kid up.
Or as a 5-year-old kid, Hitler.
No. He's one of these like historical reenactor dorks.
Yeah.
And he had like a Nazi SS uniform. And he was like, hey, I'm going out with my kid trick-or-treating. This is an obviously scary costume. So let me dress up my kid as Hitler.
Yeah.
And then social media was not amused, you know. But I've met a couple of these historical reenactor dudes a while back, and like, you got to have a little bit of sympathy to have a full closet full of Nazi shit. I think. You know what I mean? Like, especially when it's like, well, I dressed up as a Confederate soldier last year. You're like, hey there, I see a pattern. Like, I like history too. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. There's something weird about it. But now it seems like all these costumes, there's this mob retribution against people for just dressing up as different things. And I think one of the shames about it is like, for sure, there's things that are just like obvious hardline bad. But what if a person really just didn't get it? And like, do they deserve to be dragged for their insensitive costume, especially if it's something that they really liked? For instance, like you're a super huge Drake fan and you're a white dude and you bronze your skin up a little bit to be Drake because it makes the costume a little bit better. For instance, if you were dressing up as Gamora from Guardians of the Galaxy, you would need green skin.
Yeah.
Right, to sell that costume. And I'm for sure this is not like a Megyn Kelly where I'm defending blackface or anything like that in any way. Like, just hard stop on that. But what I am saying is, what would be like a way like to figure out somebody's intent a little bit? Like, is somebody doing it to be a shithead, or is somebody doing it because they love a thing so much? Do you think that makes a difference?
I think social media doesn't care.
I don't think it cares either.
Do I think there's a difference? I think there's absolutely a difference.
Yeah.
Does social media care? No, that person will get destroyed. I mean that's we've seen that go on for 20 years now.
Yeah,
that like no matter what you do, someone will figure out how to be outraged by it, and that will get the volume turned up the most on it. Even if your intentions are absolutely, completely, totally obvious, even if your intentions are the opposite of the thing that people are glomming onto, if you're clearly trying to make an anti-racist statement,
right,
but you use the N-word trying to quote a person that you hate,
right,
you can get fired for having used the N-word even in total context.
Yeah.
And trying to call someone else out. Like, it's just bananas.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think like this is a roundabout way of saying Halloween seems to be the most, in my opinion, like maybe one of the most artistic days of the year.
Sure.
Like, more people are doing, like, you know, people make their own costumes. I looked at this woman who's like a stay-at-home mom, and her Instagram page kind of got some views on it because she made brilliant Stranger Things costumes for her children.
Cool.
And they're handmade and they're just wonderful. And you're like, okay, this is clearly a very talented, fun person. And I feel like I don't like the criticism of costumes in general because it has a chilling effect on creativity.
Yep.
Obviously, you don't want to dress up like you're not trying to dress up as like a thug or something like that with blackface. Like you're doing a couple things there. One, you're being insensitive to the idea that blackface is pretty much no go anymore, which is, I think, fine. Like, if that one's going to go, no problem. But you're also kind of like making fun of a type of person and sort of like talking shit about it, you know? Whereas, like in drag, I think one of the things I love about drag so much is that it's this performative love for things. Like when you go see The Golden Girls by Heklina, you know that there's absolute love for the Golden Girls. She's not trying to shit on old people.
Right.
She's paying homage to this thing that she really loves.
Yes, totally.
I
think that something very similar is Burning Man, because Burning Man is this situation where you have all these people who normally they just go punch a clock somewhere and work in tech or whatever, and then all their creativity gets focused into this 2 weeks to 3 days, whatever, out on the playa. And what I've been twice, quite a while ago. But
I didn't know that. I didn't know you were
twice.
a burner.
Please don't say that.
But you're a burner. You went twice, so that's a burner.
There's
a difference.
That was
between,
like 10 years ago or something. Well, okay, I'll be honest. I had a great time both times, and I wouldn't go again. But if someone said, "Hey, you don't have to pay. There's an RV. It's full of gas. It has air conditioning and a shower, and it's full of vegetarian food, and the keys are in the ignition, and you've got a place to stay for 1 week," I would probably go.
Yeah.
There are other things I'd rather, it ends up costing the ticket plus prep plus everything. It ends up costing, $3,000 to $5,000 to do it, not like with extreme difficulty. And I'd way rather spend that money in a million other ways at this point. But point is that because it becomes this place where everybody can express themselves and there's this absolute freedom, what you get is it's like Halloween. Actually, when people who don't, and this is a total snobbery thing, and I hope I can explain my position clearly.
Drag these normies.
Okay.
Do it.
When people who don't make a habitual practice of working through creativity regularly, it's usually really bad, really uncomfortable, really facile. So much of Burning Man art is just boobs and boners. It really literally is. Just like, I have a bicycle and it looks like a giant penis. Or, like so much of that. And so when thinking about Halloween, people doing offensive costumes, it's not just, oh my God, people are so offensive and so insensitive. It's also like, no, people have this chance to express themselves and they don't have much to express, and they're generally clueless. Not people, everybody. I just mean so many people are generally actually quite clueless.
Yeah.
And when they get a chance to express themselves, it's clunky and ends up coming out in these ways like, I'm going to be Drake in blackface, and just total fucking cluelessness. And I'm not saying people shouldn't express themselves. People shouldn't be creative. I'm just saying that I think especially in America, we have this idea that all art should be able to be understood by everybody, and that it should be totally democratic. And that's completely nonsense. There's no reason to believe that if you go to school to study physics, you get better at that.
Right.
If you go to school, or you should get better at it.
Right.
If you go to school to learn writing, to learn sculpture, to learn 3D graphics, whatever, ostensibly you get better at that. And the person who doesn't ever do that is likely to not have a lot of good ideas. Or maybe they do.
Or they're like a weird genius and just nail it.
Oh yeah, I mean, everybody should be able to do whatever the fuck they want. But let's be honest, when people don't make a practice of things, they're not as good at it. And this comes back to the internet thing of like America's total disbelief in experts. It's a very American thing to believe that, well, I read 3 articles online and now I know more than these thousands and thousands of people who've been studying it their entire lives and are pulling from a 1,000-year legacy of science,
Yeah, I feel like the outrage mob is sort of the equivalent of that. You know what I mean? Like, it's really like you've like read a couple articles about what you should hate, and you have completely effaced your ability to have nuance or whatever. Like, you know, because somebody could do a potentially offensive costume excellently. Like, for example, you could be a blonde-haired Coachella girl that knew how to sew and create a phenomenal Native American dress costume. Like, it could be like as great as it could ever be, like hand beaded and all this stuff. And that extreme artistic achievement would be nullified in the public's mind because of like the person who did it, which is, I mean, to me, that's very, I get it, you know what I mean? But it's a very anti-art.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree to a degree.
I think what's really missing from these like new narrative stories where you're supposed to jump on people is intent, man. Like, totally, like, what was your intent in doing this thing? And I get it, like there's billions of people, so you can't suss out every single person's intent.
Yeah.
But I think a good way of going through life, and this is kind of in this I just read this hippie book, The Four Agreements, you know, that Don Miguel Ruiz book. It's one of these hippie books that kind of teaches you how to live life so you don't suck as much. But one of the things is just about, you know, basically assuming positive intent, and you're still grimacing.
Fuck.
It's
Again,
so crazy.
if this was on YouTube, people would just notice randomly throughout this episode, I'm just like turning my head and wincing.
Yeah, it's almost like you have Tourette's or something like that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. Keep
Are you
going.
culturally appropriating Tourette's right now? I find that extremely offensive as someone
My
who has a slight
disability
twitch.
is not your... I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
But yeah, it's something like if there was one thing I wish I could bring back to culture broadly, it's just assuming positive intent. Like, just assume that someone did not mean to be shitty. And like, if you assume that, then you're probably going to have a better time for yourself. You're not always going to be on edge or whatever. And you might find yourself able to enjoy things that you thought you were cut off from before, you know? And I think it would, more than anything else, like just assuming positive intent from other people would dial down anger and rage. You know, if you just started off, and if somebody did do something indefensible or whatever, it would be so obviously beyond the pale that you would be like, okay, you suck. Like, obviously you suck. Because there's so much that people are bummed out about now that I feel like it gets dispersed a little bit. You know, like in this whole like Trump derangement syndrome culture we live in right now, when he does do something that is pretty terrible, you've heard it every day since he was elected, so it sort of doesn't even register anymore. Like, I just look online, I'm like, oh, what did he do? Oh, okay. Well, I mean, now what? Like, nothing happened before, nothing happened again. It looks like the whole Russian thing is going to be you know, as they say in the the lanyard class, they say it's a nothing burger. It looks like that's going to be a nothing. And I think that like having it all spread out makes it when people do really bad shit, instead of everybody's always worn out from chasing cars all the time, they should be ready to kill that intruder. You know, it's like a dog like that's worn itself out. But I think the reality is the reason why people don't assume positive intent is it's fun to be enraged. I think that's the thing. That's the truth, is that people have this is my hippie coming out here, but this low vibrational method of entertaining themselves. And it's just bad.
Unfortunately, I think that that rage has consolidated the American political right and has further fractured the American political left.
Yeah.
We've become more polarized, as everybody says, and it's true. But I think that the way that outrage culture is functioning is it's really gotten the two sides to react in opposite ways.
And I think, too, that this isn't natural at all. I think this is engineered by the media class. Like, CNN's ratings have been better this year than they've ever been in their entire history. And if you don't think some fucking cigar-chomping douchebag that owns that company isn't recognizing that and filling up his fucking chubby little haunches with foie gras, I think you'd be silly to not think that, you know? And it, like, all this, like, we've never been more divided. It's just a drum that people have been banging on, and it is making people more divided. And I think that if there is a real resistance in this country, it should be against this type of media.
Sure.
Not all media, of course, but in particular, this type of media.
Absolutely. You know? Yeah.
Like, if you listen to Rachel Maddow or Tucker Carlson, you should fucking stop. Like, they're both terrible in their own ways. I've never listened
to either of them.
Yeah, they're terrible.
Let's get back to Halloween.
Yeah, Halloween.
I think that one thing about Halloween that I think is interesting living in San Francisco is that Halloween for so many years was consolidated in the Castro.
Yep.
Like everyone would go to the Castro.
It was the most fun.
Yeah, it was crazy. And like people would go all out, and people who lived in the Castro, at least on Market and Castro and 18th Street, would, have these parties that were mostly for the window more than for their homes. And then it just kind of got out of hand, and more police started coming, and then there were stabbings. And I think there was a shooting one year, and just the opposite of what it should have been. One of my, this is one of my favorite stories, period. My friend Keith Hennessy, who he is also fellow Canadian, but like performance artist, very, very political activist. He, quite a long time ago, I think this was in like the 90s, he and a bunch of friends were in the Castro on Halloween, and they were all just naked, just being themselves. And
that's allowed on a given Sunday in the Castro.
Totally.
Yeah.
It probably was today. But he was telling me that he leaving the gates, and there were a bunch of guys like hanging out there, and one of them turned and goes, "Faggot." And Keith comes up to him.
Naked.
Fully naked. Strangely, I would assume emboldened by that. And got in his face and is like, "What the fuck did you just say to me? Do you know where you are? Do you know what day it is? Do you know what this date represents to us here in this city, in this neighborhood?" And he said, "Apologize to me now, or one of us is going to die."
That's the right attitude.
And the guy was like, "No." And I guess his friends were like, "Come on, man, just apologize to him. We want to leave." And Keith was like, "No, apologize, or one of us is going to die." The guy ended up apologizing, but his friends were like, "Hey, man, just apologize. Let's go." The guy ended up apologizing.
Well, you've seen those videos online where guys like go up to somebody and try to fight them, and then they rip their pants off and they have a Speedo on. The other person who was ready to fight runs.
Yes.
I mean, it's such a circuit jamming thing to be naked.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to work at I used to work at a bar in the Castro, and Halloween was always just fucking insane.
Yeah.
That's the other thing in the bar industry. Halloween is gnarly.
Yeah, it's bad.
It is one of the high amateur days of the, as much as it's a beautiful holiday or whatever, for bars, it sucks. I remember there's this dude, you remember the old Mac the Knife from the McDonald's commercials, the big moon head and the suit? This dude wanders in wearing a Mac the Knife costume, a pretty good one, paper mache head, the whole thing. Jesus. I'm always amazed when people's costumes are just something totally fucking obscure like that. Like, I'm going to be Muppet Babies Miss Piggy. Like, right. What? Like, why? And so this dude comes in and he starts like grabbing people's asses.
Oh.
Yeah, in the Castro. Super weird. But girls. He's like he's just some dude who's wandered in.
Yeah.
And I was pretty salty back then. And
which bar was this? Lime?
Lime, yeah. Which never had any security ever. It was totally insane because that place was a madhouse all the time. I actually like got involved in quite a few physical altercations here, which is kind of weird. Maybe it's just me, but so the dude, he comes in and he's grabbing people, and because I was like super into kickboxing and jiu-jitsu back then, you can't talk about that shit and then not take action because then you look like an asshole afterwards.
Yeah.
And I remember like I grabbed the dude by his Mac the Knife head and just twisted it around backwards and just grabbed him by it and just threw him out the front door, and he just went spilling ass over head like into the street. It was one of my favorite things I've ever done in my entire life. Awesome. It was, to be able to throw somebody like cowboy bar style out wearing a Mac the Knife costume is like a peak experience.
God, I wish that was on YouTube.
Oh, me too, man. The last fight I got in, it's been years ago, but there were security cameras, and I always regret not getting the footage of it because it was such a funny fight.
Go on.
Oh, well, this dude, like, I was the worst. I would never cut anybody off ever. Like, I didn't give a fuck how drunk you got. It was just the bouncer's problem. It wasn't mine. I was like, you're going to keep tipping, and I'm going to keep serving. The line for me, though, was if I couldn't understand you, I just wouldn't serve you simply because I didn't know what to serve you. And this dude, it was like pop scene or something like that, or like some hip hop night at Rich Street. And this dude comes up And he's like, blah, 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 and then he's just pointing at the beers. And they're basically all out because it had been a busy night. I was like, I don't know, man. What do you want? I just can't understand him. He's this like white dude about my size, so kind of on the smaller side. And I'm like, you're cut off. Get the fuck away from me. And because we could be as mean as we wanted to back then, which was great. And he reaches across the bar and punches me in the face, like right in the face. And it is like 3 deep at the bar. It's really crowded. And we had plastic glasses because the bar was so gnarly that we couldn't have glass because people would like, I mean, we had somebody lose an eye one night. I mean, it was crazy there. But I had this plastic, yet still heavy pint glass. I threw at him as hard as I could and hit him right in the face with it and jumped over the bar and used the just basic, like, you know, hands behind the back, like trip takedown that you learn on like your first day of jujitsu.
Yeah.
And it fucking works. That's the thing that's so crazy about it. It worked. And I'm still not even any good. I'm still a white belt after years. But I got on top of him and just started like collar choking him with his shirt. And the best part was like all my friends saw it. Like a ton of people saw it. And the bouncers came, split us up. I got behind the bar. And by the time I got behind the bar, all the same people were still there. I must have made $100 in 5 minutes in tips. Like so many people tipped me. It was crazy. So anybody who's like, violence isn't necessary. Violence is fucking hilarious sometimes. And sometimes it's absolutely necessary. But Halloween was always crazy like that. Oh, did you ever get to see the Cramps Halloween night?
Not on Halloween. I've seen them live, but not on a Halloween.
My first Halloween in San Francisco, I got to go see. I went and did that, and I was like, "Man, this is the fucking best Halloween town ever." And I was totally wrong. It's still New Orleans, but San Francisco, I think, is a close second. What has been your best costume ever?
There was one year, I'm super proud of this one. I dressed as somebody else, which let me explain. So.
Isn't that what most people do when they dress up?
Well, yes. Okay. Yeah. So this is probably like 10-ish years ago. I used to shave my head to the skin every day. I would never go a day without shaving. And I wore like collared shirts and ties like all the time. So I dressed really very up.
It's those Electroclash days.
It was totally Electroclash days. I was going to Tranny Shack a lot. I had a DJ residency for a while. And there was a little period where I had stuff to do and wasn't showing up to where I always went. And I stopped shaving and grew my hair out. And so by Halloween, I basically put on a wig, like a man wig, kind of backwards, but I put a trucker's cap on it. So it looked like real hair, and wore like horn-rimmed glasses. And, you know, my beard, when it comes in, it's really thick.
Yeah, it was impressive when I saw it last.
Yeah, I had not had denim touch my body in like 20 years at that point. And I borrowed blue jeans and a blue denim jacket with a fur collar, like faux fur, like a lamb's.
So you're basically dressed like how I usually dress.
Right. That's what I mean, like by someone else. I just looked like, and at the time, this was before everybody had beards. So right now, you could expect someone who shaves all the time to maybe show up with a beard. But back then, like, it was
no one had beards.
No one had beards yet, except for some gay guys.
And homeless people.
And I also, like, I never wore sneakers. I even wore sneakers. And no one recognized me. Like, I showed up to the party I was a resident DJ at, and I was invisible. I went to a Tranny Shack Halloween party. Friends of mine cruised me.
Awesome.
Like close friends. And my favorite part of the night was in the middle of the night, Peaches Christ was co-hosting. And Peaches Christ is saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, don't you hate when people go out for Halloween and they don't wear a costume? They're so lazy." And she looks at me and points at me and goes, "What about you, sir? Why couldn't you wear a costume tonight?" And I totally Clark Kented. I just pulled off my glasses and the show stopped.
Awesome.
Like she just totally froze computing what just happened because she had no idea who it was until I pulled my glasses off. And she's like, "Oh, I guess straight people can have costumes too." Like just didn't save the moment at all.
Weird.
It was so good. Anyway, best costume ever was the night I didn't really wear anything. I didn't hide anything. I didn't have a fake nose or anything. I just didn't shave and put on glasses, basically.
No Guy Lapont for you, huh?
Exactly. Best costume.
You know, I've never had a good costume. Like my whole life, I've never really gotten it together. Last 3 or 4 years, I went online and just basically purchased the like movie replica quality costume from of James Franco's character Saul from Pineapple Express.
Yeah.
So I have the Guatemalan sweatpants and the stupid surfer shoes and the cat T-shirt and everything, and I've worn that like 3 or 4 years in a row. But no one, if you're by yourself and you don't have like the other character Dale to contextualize it, people just think you're just a dirty hippie. And especially when my hair was super long, people just assumed I was just a dirty hippie.
Right.
You know, it was like I wasn't wearing a costume. The bummer about that costume is a lot of pieces of it have just slipped into my weekend wear. So I have these like terrible stoner Guatemalan pants that I wear pretty much every weekend. Yeah.
Great.
So for years and years and years, like Halloween, I was out every single night. I would go to all kinds of shit or whatever. I'd say for the past 10 years or so, roughly coinciding with the time that I've worked in offices, which proves that it makes you fucking lame. I just haven't really done very much during October. I always feel like I should or whatever. But this year, like I've been out like a couple times a week, like which is a lot for me. And one other than Terra Vault, my other favorite thing I went to was you and Monique's show Girl at Joe Good Performance Center. It was like seeing like a horror performance art thing. And it was interesting to see. Like, you know, my stance on performance art. I'm just like, I don't fucking get it. It's stupid.
And I don't want to get it.
I don't want to get it. It's fucking nonsense. I believe what movies say about performance art.
Yeah.
And now I'm really starting to think that there is a borderline conspiracy with filmmakers against performance artists.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really weird because I have to think about it. Like, I've seen, I don't know, 3 or 4 Monique shows since I've known her. I've liked every single one of them.
Yeah.
And all of them check the boxes of shit that I think is easily parodied. Like there's one show where she was just going, yeah, like making Yoko Ono noises, and I always make fun of Yoko Ono noises, but there's something about seeing it that is really, it's just different. I realize like part of what's fun about it is when you see something that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you're like, if performance art is like creating this novelty, like there's a scene in your show, there's a couple scenes that were really, I thought, interesting, like the scene where she has the 2 chalk marks and she's going along. Like I'm probably going to do a terrible job describing it, but basically there's some intense music going on, and there's a black wall, and Monique is just. It almost looks like she's possessed, but she has 2 pieces of chalk, one in each hand, and she's like making these crazy, like almost like heartbeat or like just lines on the wall, and she keeps going across the wall, and it makes this really. Like, oh, it could almost be like the cover of a black metal album or something like that. It makes this like design, and it's done with her body. And I was like, man, I've never seen anything like that. I meant to ask you guys how you even came up with it, if it even referenced anything else, if it had any meaning. And like, I think one of the things I liked about it, what I like about drag sometimes is every single drag show I've ever seen, I would have never come up with. Right. I'm always like, okay, you're listening to Fly in the Ointment, and you have like this weird Russian bear costume, and there is a fly swatter, but that's the only thing that you could really grab onto. I mean, that's literally a show I saw at Miss Tranny Shack, and I was like, I don't understand this. I would have never come up with this. And to me, there's a real pleasure in seeing things that you've never seen before.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how did you guys? What is that? How do you come up with it?
That one, 2 people we worked with in particular, Jesse Hewitt, who's a San Francisco-based choreographer, performer, and Marc Steger, who we've all seen Stranger Things. You know, the Demigorgon.
Yeah.
He was the Demigorgon.
Right.
He was in the movie The Pact.
Right.
He's a Hollywood-based performer. He used to live in San Francisco, but he worked on Movement with Monique as well. And I don't remember that thing in particular, but I think it was really Monique just, you know, working through this movement. And I think it was literally like, what if I had chalk? And then tried it and was like, holy shit, that's it.
Yeah, I'm curious. I've always been curious if you're like, okay, is it, you know, where does it start? Do you have chalk? You're like, I want to make a design with my body, or is it that you're doing something and, you know, you answer the question, obviously.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought was really cool, and spoiler, you know, I don't know if you guys are able to do this show, but there's a point where you have like that cloth, and you're like, okay. And there's 2 things that were really interesting about it. One is the way you address it is you guys have this build up where it's sort of this like question about consent. You know, you're like, okay, do you guys trust us? And the audience is like, of course we trust you. We love you. And then you guys both walk on either side of the audience and pull up this gigantic black sheet, which has been featured in basically the whole show at different points.
Yeah.
And it goes over the audience, and then it's over you for a while. And, you know, I was so fucking stoned. And it was just really, I mean, to the point.
Perfect.
I was like, I'd eaten so many edibles that I was at the point of like psychedelia, you know.
Whoa.
And I'm under that.
Wait. That explains something, because afterwards, Monique and I were talking. We were like, oh, yeah, Chad and Crystal were there. And I was like, I don't know if he liked it.
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was great.
Like, I think it's because you were like slightly catatonic.
Oh, no, I was like unbelievable, like just so fucked up. And because like that's how I like to go to things, you know, in general. Like that's how I like to go to work, you know. And so I don't know if you guys planned this, but under like the lights, the way the lights came through the thing, it created these like really neat, like almost like oil slick effects.
Yeah.
And then it starts to come off of you, it comes off the audience, and then it's like now it's like a ball gown trail. Yeah. You know, it's just so interesting. Like what was cool about it was like the audience experiences it, you feel it because the thing is on you, and then you know all of a sudden it's this very beautiful moment in what had been kind of like there's moments of like horror and weird body horror stuff throughout. So it's this like you can almost imagine like a David Bowie song playing during that section or something like that. And like I was like, man, like is that a thing that you've seen before, or how do you even conceptualize that? Or
no, the way that part happened is it literally like 2 years ago when we first started working on this show. I just had this idea like I want to cover the audience with a tarp, like that simple, and didn't know how we were going to do it, what kind of fabric, how that would affect things. And it seemed to make sense that, you know, I wrote that monologue, and for our listeners at home, that monologue is basically me sort of, when we did some work in progress and when we were working on the piece in general in advance, I noticed that different people were reacting to my presence on stage very differently. You know, like some people are like, oh, it's Marc. And some people are like, look, you're a 6'2", very serious looking man. You're a bit intimidating. And so when you do certain things in a live context, it's intimidating. It's live theater. Right. You're imposing. And so I wrote this piece that was sort of about that. Here I am. Am I intimidating? If I do this, am I less intimidating? If I do this, it like, what is it about my presence that may or may not be intimidating? And that led to the sort of like, you know, it circulates around this idea that we, you know, hey, the only thing in this room keeping us from killing each other is some sort of agreement. And so, you know, do we have an agreement? And then we cover the audience, which, you know, some people loved and some people hated. And some people were like, I thought I was going to run screaming, but it was also my favorite part of the show. Yeah. Because we were, you know, addressing really dark subject matter and the music's pretty heavy and we just cloak everybody in actually this like light as silk fabric that you can almost see through. Yeah. But it's still like if you're claustrophobic or have any suspicion what might happen, you know, it is live theater. Right. And, you know, it's not the ballet. Things can happen.
Yeah. Now, how do you know when a show like that's done?
When the lights go up on the first night.
Yeah, I guess
like
also...
We did keep changing things until the last minute.
I guess there's that whole thing, like all art, there's no finished art, it's just abandoned art, right?
Exactly.
Like I can't remember who said that. It might be Picasso maybe said that.
Maybe. But it is like that. I mean, a lot of what happened like with that piece of fabric, it was this wonderful thing where it started with me going like, I want to cover the audience with a tarp. I think that would be really fucking intense. And then that tarp became a gown, and it became this thing that Monique would hide under and run around in, and it would become the floor for other parts of the show. And so it became the set, right? You know, and the primary costume. But we were adding things that Monique did with that piece of fabric, like literally the week before opening. Yeah, like some of the best moments I think of the show came up like a week before.
I think one of the other things that made me enjoy the show so much is in the playbill, you had all the sources and things.
A bibliography. Yeah, you had a bibliography for just super pretentious.
I know. Well, I actually even said those where I was like, I told Crystal, she was looking at it. She's like, "Oh, have you read these books?" I was like, "I read all these books." And she's like, "Well, do shows usually have that?" I was like, "No, man, this is just Marc being hilariously pretentious." And she's like, "Well, you read all those books. Does that make you pretentious?" I was like, "I think it does."
Damn it.
Yeah. But I think like I had such, like I said, I've read all those books, all these things. And honestly, it's a lot of stuff from the show. I was like, one of the fun things for me was I recognized a little bit of our show in that show.
Oh, for sure.
And I felt like, okay, I have a context and a deep understanding of the show, and a lot of it made sense to me. And I think that there are probably other shows, other performance art shows where I have no kind, like for instance, Yoko Ono. I still don't fucking get it. Like,
sure.
I think I would even go as far as to say that I do not even like to see her face. Like it's just weird.
Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, I have just this visceral dislike for what she does.
Right.
And then I was like, okay, am I just not tuned into her boomer nonsense? Is that maybe what it is?
Maybe.
Or is it just I'm mad that she ruined the Beatles? Who knows?
We're all a little mad about that.
Yeah.
The bibliography, I will say actually, I don't know if it's an international thing, but I do know the San Francisco dance and performance world, like having a bibliography, like, yeah, it happens. It's not unheard of. It depends on the kind of performance, especially if it's somehow political, when there's a bit of an agenda happening,
right.
People tend to write their sources down sort of like, read these books too, But anyway, thanks for coming. Yeah, that's the show. It sold out 6 nights in a row.
Yeah, it was great.
And,
I mean,
thanks. And we're going to try and tour it next year. That's
badass.
That's the next goal. Yeah.
Do you think you'll do anything different if you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's come back to talking about scary thoughts. Just maybe do a bit of meta around
State of the podcast.
State of the podcast. Yeah. Like maybe a bit of like, what have we learned? We keep coming back to, or especially I keep coming back to these ideas around what we've termed from, like, I think episode 1, like rules of engagement and methods of vanquishment and progressive entrapment. And have we learned anything by doing 42 episodes of this? Have we learned anything about patterns, about how these function, about are there any of these questions that are becoming answered for us around how horror movies and literature and TV positions itself with respect to these questions?
Yeah, something I really thought would be more apparent at this stage is you can look back at different eras of horror and clearly identify what they're about. Like, oh, this is Reagan anxiety, or this is, post-Vietnam trauma. And I thought like some of the films that we looked at from the last 10 years or so, they're almost kind of all over the place with their anxieties. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I thought, you would be able to say like, okay, this is like post 9/11 returning vets and Islamo terror fears.
Right.
Right. Like that's not really anywhere. I mean, maybe somewhere, but every year or so seems to deliver a completely different set of anxieties in horror. And it's news cycle fast, and there doesn't seem to be, I guess there's this new, like, what I fucking hate this term, but elevated horror is what people are calling it,
God.
Which is, I just find it just so irritating. I mean, I thought like what we originally tried to call it, like auteur horror, made so much more sense than the idea of elevated horror. Like, oh, it's just better than usual. I mean, there's tons of things that are better than usual. Is Deadpool elevated superhero? I don't know, or it just seems dumb. But I thought we would be able to more effectively and consistently interrogate a normal set of, well, not a normal set, but I thought we'd be able to interrogate a set of anxieties in culture and maybe dig into that a little bit. And I haven't really been able to get a foothold into that at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the only thing we've been able to dig in to is not about some sort of collective dread consistency, but the way in which retro has infected fucking everything.
Yeah.
And how their concerns, the framework that retro puts on things shifts the questions constantly.
Yeah.
And it means that you're not asking contemporary questions, you're asking old questions. I just watched The Omen last night, and Damien Omen 2.
The original one or the new one?
There's a new one?
There's a newer one.
Oh,
There's like a TV show, or I think.
Oh, I didn't know that. No, I mean the original ones. And, connecting that with The Exorcist and all that. And then they're not that far off, ultimately, to my mind, from The Conjuring, which is, rooted in that there is evil and the Catholic Church is the central force of smiting it, of restraining the true devil's work. What does that have to do with 2018 exactly?
And also, that's a tough sell in 2018.
Seriously.
Yes, the Catholic Church is the answer to ultimate evil.
Yeah.
If you watch the film Spotlight, they have this stat that's like somewhere between 6 and 10 priests could be responsible for some form of molestation. That's insane.
Yeah.
If 6 to 10% of NASCAR drivers were diddling little kids, NASCAR would be shut the fuck down.
Yep.
It
wouldn't be the moral foundation for the new season of Daredevil. Daredevil season 3 is all about Catholicism being this root of ethics.
Yeah, and I actually really there's a retro feel to that a little bit too, you know, because there had been in old, especially films like The Exorcist or whatever, there's the priest that they are the rock that people fight from. It's like the sword and shield that you vanquish evil with.
Yeah.
And I really like that type of Catholic Church idea, and it seems to be more prevalent in story than in real life, right? And then methods of vanquishment.
Yeah.
I mean, monsters we'll just say monsters is a category. They're so all over the place now, and it feels like in old movies you'd be like, yeah, you got to stake that dude in the heart, so you're waiting for that to happen in a film. And now it's almost like postmodern in a way that you don't know what is going to vanquish the thing because you don't know what the rules are because there is no center anymore. And that's kind of interesting, but that's totally watered down by the retromania. You could have this idea where, okay, there are more films like It Follows and The Witch where you're like, what the fuck is even going on?
Yeah.
How do you even fight this thing? Is it a thing? I don't know.
Right.
And even those creatures are very resistant to any sort of boring exegesis, where you're like, okay, this represents George W. Bush, obviously. What does the STD monster from It Follows mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. I think we also have a lot that follows a sort of video game model.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you seen Mandy yet?
I haven't seen it
Okay.
yet, no.
Mandy... I don't know if it's the best movie ever made or just a joke that'll be forgotten in 2 years. I just don't know. It's whatever it is, it sure is that. But it follows the video game model. It's like Taken. It's like revenge. Mm-hmm. You know very quickly he's
bosses. You're
pretty much.
It's
like
boss,
he's got
level boss.
Yes, exactly. But the way it gets there is what I appreciate about it is the way that all unfurls is what the fuck is happening. Where it's basically going, but how it's going there makes no sense, and it's kind of beautiful that way. Yeah.
I was really disappointed in Ready Player One, and that first, it's just whatever it was. I thought the book was very fun. It talked about retromania,
oh yeah,
every sentence is retro.
Yeah.
And I thought that there was an opportunity to say something about that with this film. And kind of have a meta narrative where you're like, okay, a lot of spy novels post GoldenEye, the video game, have a very video game feel where it's okay, you can almost feel the character leveling up.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There's scenes where, okay, he's got the high level weapon now, and now he's got the low level weapon or whatever. And I don't know.
I mean, that's the problem with narrative.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about this chicken or egg thing before, especially with movies. Do movies follow a particular narrative structure because that is perfect for how humans experience narrative?
Right.
Or is it, if you're like me, you're 47 and you've seen this many thousand movies and 99% of them follow a certain trajectory. Mm-hmm. If you see something that doesn't, it feels wrong and it feels like it's failing. And there has to be something else particularly novel and compelling to overlook that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, as much as we're supposed to be having this horror renaissance right now, I've seen fewer films I liked now than I have in the past. Which is, there's obvious, things that are big hits, like Get Out or, It Follows the Witch, Stranger Things. These are big properties, but I find the lower level horror to be really uncompelling. Mm-hmm. One of the things I really discovered about myself here is I thought that I would just get totally back into horror like I was when I was a little kid, and it would just be my thing. I think a lot of the the more successful horror podcasts out there kind of do that. Like they're all in, it's like, you have the host, her Instagram page is just full of her VHS collection that she's found, and she's watching movies on a 10-inch thing, and she's hot and tattooed, and she's watching Chucky 2 on a Wednesday night, and you're like, wow, that's so fun. It reminds me of being a little kid, but it's different because there's a hot girl involved, like I thought that like this exploration of horror would have brought that back in a little bit for me, and it hasn't. It's actually made me a lot pickier with what I want to watch. Like I really only want to watch vetted, excellent horror films. I don't want to just take a chance on, Hatchet 3 or whatever.
Right, but I think this is possibly a similar question that comes up when thinking about what music do you like. And the way in which you are neurologically predisposed to cling to the music that you fell into when you were 13, 14, 15. Like that music will always be pure for you.
Right.
And you can't unwrite that narrative. And you also, it's almost impossible for, like, okay, what was your favorite band when you were 14?
Iron Maiden.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you will never have another Iron Maiden. Nothing will supplant Iron Maiden. No, it is absolutely impossible for some band, no matter how good they are, to come along and supplant Iron Maiden from you. It's just written into your code, and that's true of all people with this relationship to popular culture,
right.
like almost every one of us in, let's say, North America, right?
Certainly everybody listening to this show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that happens a bit with film as well. It might not be when you're 14, but what sort of establishes your taste with regard to, you can identify with music at an early age because of the way music functions in our culture. I think developing a taste in a true taste in film takes a little longer, maybe.
Right.
But the movies that you really saturate yourself with, I'm sure by the time you're 21, it's kind of hard to. You might get newer favorite films, but it might be hard to sort of like recreate the specialness of the films that you identified with when you were like late high school, early 20s.
I think you're absolutely right about that, because I think about like the films when I was like, 10 to 14, right? That's probably when you get the most imprinted with the things that you're just always going to like. That was like the comedy horror boom, like that's what, and to this day, I will more likely enjoy a horror movie that has comedic elements or even something straight up funny. Like What We Do in the Shadows is the best vampire movie I think I've ever seen.
It's amazing.
And it's a straight up horror comedy.
Yeah.
And I think even those are the moments, even in your show, like the moment where it's like tense, but then it's funny. That's what I like the best. And that's one of the reasons why I liked Get Out as much as I did. I think I didn't like it for the reasons a lot of critics liked it. Like people are like, oh, it's the moment, it's saying this about that, or like, yeah, for sure. Like every single Oscar pimping movie out there is going to do something like that. Like stack it full of victim narrative and throw it out there and see if it gets an Oscar, right? But the thing that makes, it's look at the Oscars. But you look at Get Out, and I think the reason why Get Out was so good isn't because of what it was talking about. I think it's as good as it was because Jordan Peele is comedic master, and he's also a horror fan, and he brought those two things together. And he, even in his interview on The Nerdist, he says, I want people to be talking about horror and comedy along with race. And you have it right there. If we're talking about the authorial intent, he's just spelled it out for you. And so I didn't see any writing about Get Out being funny at all. I didn't see anything. You would hear like
the funny moments in that movie are so funny.
Just the ending of it,
good.
like it ends on a joke.
True.
Like, I mean, to me, like, is it a horror or a comedy? I'm gonna throw Get Out into a comedy category. And I think it's almost a shame that it got swept in this like woke film category, because I think that moment is going to pass, and like a good joke's going to last. I could be wrong.
No, I hear you.
And I also don't mean that people are going to be less like woke or whatever. I just think that like having it really dialed up in front in a film that will pass a little bit. Like it'll need to move into a more organic way into the film.
Yeah. What else?
Like, what do you think you'd like to see happen with the show in the next year or two? Like, what would you think that we should do?
My biggest hope for this podcast is that horror movies would get better and better, and we'd have more current content that was worth that the text itself had more to talk about.
Yeah.
Like, I wish there were more The Witch, Get Out, It Follows.
Yeah.
I wish there was so much of it we couldn't keep up with it. I wish we were in the horror boom that apparently we're in, but it doesn't actually feel like we are, unless I'm just being sort of like willfully disappointed.
No, I think you're right. I think that we will look back on the films that we've liked while we made the show that were current in the way that people look back on like the torture porn time. Like it was, or French Extremity. It was a period of time and it passed.
Yeah.
And I think that we're probably slated for at least 5 years of just remake frenzy. Like, I think that that's going to be the dominant thing. I think we'll probably see, like we just saw Halloween just came out, the new one with Jamie Lee Curtis. I think we'll see Suspiria's coming out. And I think what we might see are these like top shelf remakes. And to me, that's kind of a bummer.
Yep.
Like Suspiria is great. You know, like it's its own thing. I would rather see, I mean, like I haven't seen the film, so I could be totally wrong about this. But I would probably rather see an original horror film with Tom York's soundtrack and Tilda Swinton in it than a remake of Suspiria.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like I would rather just have a new thing to look at. But I'm always like chasing novelty more than enjoying nostalgia.
Absolutely. I'm the same.
But said, I do love nostalgia too. You know, I don't think you can help but like it. It's designed to be liked. You know?
It continues to be the dominant narrative form in pretty much everything we listen to and watch right now.
Yeah, it's
not abating.
Yeah, and it just has that whole Fukuyama into history feel to it. Like, is that it? You know, like you just don't have anything else. I mean, like, and I you know, the other thing I thought we would see a little bit more of, even though I didn't like this film very much, but like Girl That Walks Home at Night, like where are all the foreign horror films? I mean, maybe that's just laziness on my part. There's probably a shitload of them that are great that I've just never seen.
Doesn't seem like it. Under the Shadow is really good, but it's also like not that far off from the Babadook. But yeah, I agree. I wish there were horror movies coming from, and it, not even necessarily different cultures. It's more like different voices.
Yeah.
Which is, again, why like Get Out in particular is really interesting.
Because I've been finding it in literature. Like I've been, you know, like I think one of the little paths I've gone down lately is just reading, you know, sci-fi from, you know, feminist sci-fi or Islamic sci-fi or whatever. And that sort of is interesting to me. Maybe it's a little bit of just, there's a bit of exoticness to it because I'm unfamiliar with a lot of the tropes in those cultures. But, you know, I'd like to see maybe something more like that in horror, or a story that I didn't know, or something to actually be afraid of. I just don't think I'm going to find it in horror. And sometimes that makes me think like, okay, well, if I'm so down on the genre, I'm spending an awful lot of time exploring that, you know?
Well, you know, it's funny. I think that one of the things that makes horror exciting for me, and I've said this on the podcast several times, is that because the expense to profit ratio is generally pretty good if you're a producer, like you can make a cheap horror movie and turn a profit.
Yeah.
It's more guaranteed than any genre. I mean, I don't want to make a complete assumption, but it's generally like a good bet to make horror movies. It doesn't take much money to get the job done. And I think that generates a lot of experimentation because, first of all, if you don't have $50,000 riding, you can take more chance on your product. You can take more chances. But then also, if you are not as worried about getting your $5 million back, because you probably are, you can take more chances. You can roll the dice more on ideas. And that doesn't seem to extend to cross-cultural horror films. It seems that you can do a lot in America within horror, but it doesn't seem that same sort of a gamble takes place in many other cultures. There's definitely, you know, obviously a lot of incredible horror coming out of Korea right now.
Yeah.
And still seems to be true in Japan. It was in Italy. I don't know that it is. There's still like crazy shit happening in parts of Europe, especially France. But it's not like this thing about horror film is just a truism across the globe.
Yeah. I can't even name a single one, but I bet there's at least one crazy good Russian horror movie. And think about like how weird like Tarkovsky films are. Like, it's just like, it's odd. It's just a totally different culture with a different type of alphabet. I bet that there's at least one great Russian
Considering
horror.
how completely fucked up that country is and
That's
how much
what I
money
mean.
there is
Yeah.
actually there. Let's look into this.
Yeah, we'll have to find it. If you're a viewer and you know anything about Russian horror, let us know.
Please tell us.
Yeah. I kind of thought that we would, I know we talked about this in the past, but like we would develop some sort of horror thing of our own. We would have created an original work, and you and Monique did it. So I was like, there you go. It's pretty badass.
Well, I think you and I also talked about like developing a theory of horror, and it's just sort of not happening. I mean, I think that, we had early on talked about, you had focused on this idea of auteur horror. I was very focused on this idea of aesthetic horror. A lot of films in the last 10 years have really pushed the Argento vision into creating visuals that are so overwrought that the aesthetic itself has become the horror, but it doesn't seem like that actually caught fire. It doesn't seem like, no, and I don't mean my term didn't catch fire. Yeah. I don't mean I didn't actually invent a term. I just mean that thing, even though I think Mandy is part of what I'm thinking of, it doesn't seem to have launched more and more films of the same ilk.
Well, happy Halloween.
Let's fade to black and roll the credits. You don't need to rate or review us, but you should subscribe if you haven't already to our podcast.
That's always cool.
Join the mailing list, and we will see you next time for 1987's Near Dark. Thanks for listening. I'm going to edit this out.